All right, let's talk some hockey. It's been a minute. I'm a little late doing this week's episode, but I did do you guys a bit of a favor last week, giving you two episodes. So forgive me for the delay here. Hopefully, I, uh, I put some in the bank there from last week. But okay, so there's a lot going on, a lot that's happened, a lot to get to coming up this weekend. A couple games actually starting I think within the hour. So I got to make sure I get to that before those games get started. Okay. Let me bring you up to speed on some things over the weekend in case you missed any of it. 14U Honey Baked beat Little Caesars in a matchup of number one versus number two in the 2009 birth year. Let's see here. I was looking at, kind of reading between the lines on the box score there. And again, the game sheets doesn't offer a whole lot of insight as far as who did what and whatnot. But because of the way this game went down, I did make a mental note of it. I need to go back on Live Barn and probably check it out if it's available because a lot of good back and forth in that game. Honeybake jumped up to a 2-0 lead. Caesar stormed back with three unanswered, and then they took a lead. Then Honeybaked scored two more unanswered goals to then earn the 4-3 win. So you're looking at a game there between the top two teams in the state in that birth year with three different lead changes, a lot of back and forth. I'll definitely have to go back and rewatch that. So I don't know what I say here. Yeah, I don't know if that's enough. Number two beating the number one team there. I don't know if that's enough for me to flip flop them in the rankings just yet. Obviously, just because of the way that game unfolded, with a lot of good back and forth, they're quite clearly evenly matched there. So I'm not going to pull the shoot on that one just yet and upset the apple cart on the rankings. Um, Another good matchup here. The 15s VH beat OJG. That was a matchup between the number three and the number four teams in the state. And lived up to the billing. Close in the standings, ended up being close on the ice as well. VH won 5-4 by way of a shootout. 16U Caesars. Here's where I might have to maybe not necessarily eat some crow, but I'll flip flop these rankings for sure moving forward. Caesars 16s. I've been talking about them a bunch and how I felt like VH might kind of take the torch and claim that top spot as the number one team in the '07 birth year in the state. Caesars topped VH 4-2, so another close game in this series. Those two teams have played three times this year. All three games have been super close, super competitive. But, and this is where I might have to flip flop the rankings here. Caesars now holds a 2-1 advantage in that season series. So that might be enough there for me to kind of move the needle and take VH out of that top spot. But there's a lot of hockey left this season. You obviously have states at the end of the year or at the end of the season. So um, again, they're two evenly matched teams with a ton of talent on both sides. I feel pretty comfortable slotting Caesars into that top spot, rightfully so, obviously. But I'm not going to sleep on VH yet either. I'm not gonna count them out. With it's only October now, so a lot of hockey left. And then I'll mention this too. '07 Fox Motors 7-1 in their last 8 games. I missed my note there, but I think 6 of those 7 wins are actually against other Michigan AAA teams. So that's quite a run for them. They're on a pretty good heater. I'll be curious to see how they do and kind of continue and keep that momentum going. But definitely something to follow there in the '07 birth year. So with that kind of buttons up what's happened in the last week. And now I did want to take a quick look at what's coming up on the calendar and starting literally today, literally right now at the time of recording. The CCM Motown is taking place throughout Metro Detroit, and I think even spills into a couple Lansing rinks. I could be wrong on that, but huge tournament, 350 odd teams or so from around the country. Some Canadian teams trickling down as well. So that tournament, particularly super competitive at some of the younger age levels, your 2012s, your 10s, that type of age range. When you get up into some of the age groups I tend to focus on more 18s, 16s, 15s, 14s. I'd consider it to be good competition, not great, not elite competition like it is at some of the younger levels. It's a lot of, we can call it middle of the pack AAA teams, in the 30s, 40s, 50s ranked nationally, at least according to my hockey rankings. So, but even so, looking at MDHL has a team in the 15s division, in the 16s division. MHA has a team presence in the 15s. Honey Baked has a presence. A lot of local, so it's going to be worth keeping an eye on a couple of programs and see one how they step up to some of that national competition, but then two, there's a couple of head-to-head matchups as well. Let me see if I can find my notes. MDHL takes on Victory Honda on Saturday at 1:40 between the 08s. So that'll be an interesting matchup to monitor there. And then obviously Honey Baked, MHA, both in the 18s division, don't have a game scheduled against each other. However, if both advance and make it to the elimination rounds, you could again potentially see that Michigan on Michigan matchup. And then the MDHL and MHA, both at the 16U level, would make for some pretty unique high school hockey all-star team competition there. I do believe those two programs went head to head. I think it was last year. I want to say it was at the 18U age level, and it was in the semis or championship round. I forget what it was, um, but yeah. So anytime you can get some of that crossover, I think is good competition. It's good locally, and then obviously when you get to play teams like the Pittsburgh Vengeance, South Hills Panthers is another one I saw. Those games. MHA plays Pittsburgh Vengeance at 11:20 today, so that's literally like 60 minutes from now. So wanted to get some of that in there. Definitely worth noting. Definitely worth having circled on your calendar and highlighting some of those games. I'm going to try my best to peek in on a couple of these. Like I said, the Michigan v Michigan matchups are the ones I'm a little more intrigued about, and right now there's only one on the schedule, but definitely want to keep an eye on that as the weekend unfolds. Okay, let's start in on some 10-minute talks on our Michigan high school hockey conferences. If you've been listening to the podcast at all or watching here on YouTube, we've rifled through, gosh, I don't know, six conferences already, and continue to work our way through. I think we got 7 more to go. I got 3 on deck for today, and then we'll go 2 and 2 over the next 2 weeks. Next couple conferences coming up, a lot of teams, a lot of players and storylines to pay attention to. So we're gonna have to break that out a little bit differently than I've done some of the previous episodes. But anyways, okay. So today, bringing you the Big North Conference, some of the top teams in Northern Michigan. We also hit on the Saginaw Valley League, which is another great league with it's actually had a couple state champions now over the last couple of years. And then you also have who was my other one? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking, and it's totally lost in the mix here. Metro League. There we go. Of course. So a lot to get to today. I'll try to cram it all into 10 minutes per conference. We'll see how it goes, and we'll go from there. Let me get back to my starting point. Here we go. Let me hydrate so we're ready to go. I guess we could kind of look at these 10-minute talks as 3 periods: first period, second period, third period. I kind of like that. We'll go with that maybe. Okay. We'll get the timer ready. As I stall, here we go. Ready? Oh, before I do that, I did want to touch on. I did get to sit in on the Michigan High School Hockey Coaches Association. Had a meeting on Sunday, kind of an intro meeting to the season. A lot of returning coaches, some new coaches as well. Just kind of introductory to the season. The MHSAA director, Cody Inglis, was on it to kind of sit in on that and get some insight and intel into the high school hockey coaches circle. By being a member, you get access to the coaches site, which is a fantastic resource for any coaches in the game, and kind of networking and being integrated into that community. Super valuable. So anyone who in the high school hockey space that's not registered with the MHSHCA, I would strongly suggest doing that because of the benefits and again the networking and the connections that you can make. Super valuable, ton of information there. And like I said, especially for the high school hockey circles to be able to sit in on that. It's a good community where everyone's basically pulling in the same direction. So I've also been tipped off on some conference media days, MIHL, KLAA. I think the OAA also sent me something on Twitter. So some of those media days are starting to go public as well. I'm going to try and make it to as many as I can. But super cool that a lot of conferences are starting to do that. Good experience for the kids, right? And kind of get some of that experience where applicable. I know maybe not all media days do it the same, but get those players there in front of the media and to have some of those conversations early on before the season starts. The media obviously then kind of gets a nice baseline to start from at the beginning of the year. So between the Coaches Association meeting Sunday and then a lot of the media day stuff I've seen trickle in since then, I'm starting to get excited. I'm sure you guys are starting to get excited too. Getting closer and closer to the start of the season, which leads into, we'll get back to it here, our 10-minute talks on conferences in high school hockey. Before you do that, again, as I ask all the time, please like and subscribe. Can't thank you enough for the support across all platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. If you're downloading and listening to the podcasts on Apple and Spotify, be sure to rate and subscribe to those as well. That is greatly appreciated, and I can't thank you enough. So if you've enjoyed anything we've talked about here in the first, 2 months now of doing the podcast, again, your support is greatly appreciated in the form of subscriptions on YouTube, and that way you don't miss any of the content I put out too. So with that, we'll go in here. 10 minutes on the clock. Start, and we will get into the Big North Conference. And to start out, man, I don't know if any program in Northern Michigan has seen more success and long-term success than Traverse City Central. And might sound a little silly because they haven't won the conference in a couple of years now, but going all the way back to, I think it was 2006 when they won a state title. Chris Givens obviously has enjoyed a ton of success with this program over the last 2 decades, really. A slew of conference championships, regional championships, deep playoff runs, like I just mentioned. Traverse City Central has kind of been the class of the Big North in over a long stretch of time as well. But like I mentioned, haven't been able to get it done last year in the year before. They've kind of come up just a little bit short. And, I think they came up like 1 game shy to Alpena last season, came up another game short. I think it was to Petoskey the season before. And so the big question to me, as I posed on the preview on pdspicks.com, which you can check out, is this year the year that TCC gets over the hump? Like I said in the blog, a bounce here, a slip up there, just a one break is all TCC really could have needed to swing the pendulum the other way the last couple of years, and they could have been conference champions as opposed to Alpena, who did it last year, and like I said, Petoskey, I believe, the year before. So hockey is a funny game, and sometimes all it takes is one bounce here or there, and that's the difference. And unfortunately for the Trojans, they hadn't been able to get it done the last couple of years. So is this the year they get over the hump? I think a Traverse City team does in fact win the Big North this season, but it won't be the Trojans. I'll phrase it that way. I don't usually drop my predictions just a couple minutes in, into the 10-minute talk, but I think I'll start there this time around. We'll change things up a little bit. Uh, Last season's champ, Alpina. You would think in a lot of my previews so far, I've kind of leaned towards the incumbent and the defending champ, but Alpina graduated its leading scorer, graduated its starting goalie. Their top two would-be returners opted to go the AAA route, which, to each their own. Hopefully it works out for them, but we'll see how that whole process unfolds. They've got some nice young pieces, but ultimately it feels like a bit of a rebuilding season for Chris Limbach. They've got a couple the young pieces I saw at MHA showcase. Like they've got some nice promising kids. Just might be a little bit too early for some of those guys to start making a run. So I do see a bit of a drop off there for Alpina. TC Central kind of in the same boat. They graduated a ton of their top guys, and we'll need what did I see? Oh, okay. Um, I'm reading my notes and trying to do this on the fly. Uh, they've got some guys coming back, but they were more, I'd kind of say, role players in the last year and the last couple of years. Can they step into a much bigger role this coming winter? That's going to be a big challenge. Teams like Petoskey, Gaylord might be lacking some of the depth this season as well. They might have, a couple forwards, a pair of forwards here, or a top line there. But the depth obviously is a bit of a question mark for me. That leaves me with TC West, who, they get two key players back in the form of forward Brandon Myers and defenseman Callan Ray. Those are two key cornerstones, both up front and on the back end. They both are coming off pretty strong fall seasons in the MDHL. Myers scored 10 points in league play, and I think was even a tournament kid for them as well, going out to Minnesota and I guess both Minnesota trips. But anyways, Elite Prospects says the kid was born in Germany. I don't know if that's factual or if that's just some type of wonky typo that tends to happen. But if so, that's pretty cool. Nonetheless, he's a 4-year letterman for the Titans. You love to see that. Guys who have been with the program for a long time and really gotten to see the evolution of a program in the span of that 4 years. Scored 40 points as a junior. When you've got both of those guys coming back and they're pretty high end, pretty talented kids, that is far and away more than some of the other programs in the conference are returning. So that's a big leg up in my opinion. Let me work through a little bit more here. What am I missing? Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it as far as that goes. Like TC West, again, those are two cornerstones that not everybody has. So in my opinion, when everybody's starting at the same point in November, when you have those two guys, it kind of gives you a bit of a leg up or a bit of a head start in the process. So couple players worth mentioning, or maybe you want to key on this season as the Big North season unfolds. I mentioned I mentioned Myers and Ray. Gaylord's Brighton Thaxton factored in on 65% of the Blue Devils offense as a sophomore. That's pretty incredible. I can't speak to his versatility or his skill set by any means, but I'm sure Gaylord will once again be leaning on him to produce and maybe even outproduce that 65% that he did a season ago. For them to have any success, though, any sustained success, he'll have to make his teammates around him better, or the challenge for the coaches will be to kind of develop that supporting cast around him. My problem or concern, I'll say, with TC Central is just how young they'll be. I think it's going to be a bit of a growing, learning experience in 2023, 24, similar to that of Alpina, right? I look at Graham Peters, had a really nice freshman season. Luke Weaver, Luke Vander Roost, you got a pair of Lukes there. They may be called upon to play a much larger role this coming season. It still just feels a little bit early to me for any of them to really carry the load, either in the locker room and being a leader in the group, or producing in bunches on the ice as well. It just still feels a little bit early to me when you got to lean on some of those young guys. So TC Central may be, a year, 2 years away still. I loved Luke Miller at the MHA showcase. I mentioned that. Sophomore defenseman out of Alpena, was one of the highest graded defensemen among the 15s that I had at the showcase. Real great footwork, real fun to watch. I know Alpena has lost some top end prospects, but um, Miller has a ton of promise and really could be that next name to kind of come out of the program, as they've produced quite a few high level guys in the last couple of years. And one more kid I wanted to give a shout out to, John Rensberry. He's a 4-year kid for Alpena. He's been the backup for the better part of 3 seasons now, and played behind some really talented, really good goalies for the Wildcats. They've all since graduated now. It in theory is his net or his opportunity to take ownership of that. And I hear great things about him. Super athletic kid, 3-sport athlete, I think. So definitely has a huge opportunity there. And then obviously with Coach Limbach, all signs kind of pointing to a good development season where you're working with young kids and implementing a lot of systems. Uh, you know, if you can get Rensberry to kind of be the backbone of the program there while everything is in flux in front of him, he can kind of be that um, stable presence on the ice. It's a big opportunity for him, and excited to see obviously what he does with it. Last thing I'll end with here: save the date for Givens Bowl 14. Pretty well known story, I think, for most people in the high school hockey circles. But for those of you maybe not familiar with it, TC Central head coach Chris Givens will clash with his son Cam Givens, who's the assistant coach for Alpena. Those two programs meet twice a year, every year. Met 3 times last year because they played in the playoffs. Set to clash, obviously, 2 more times this season. The first meeting being literally 48 hours before Christmas Day. So that'll be an interesting one to make note of and to keep an eye on. Let's see here. Dad holds a slight advantage, with a 7-6-0 record. But the son, Cam, has won the last 3 meetings, including putting the old man out last season in the postseason. So should be an interesting one. Couldn't have timed that one any better. So we will button up the Big North and definitely keep an eye on top teams, players there. Obviously, some big matchups. I can never get enough of Givens Bowl in high school hockey. So okay, so we'll move on and head a little bit south to the Saginaw Valley League. Let me fire up the clock one more time, and we're off and running. So winners of the last 3 league championships. Flint Powers obviously will look to make it 4 in a row. And I really respect what Coach Travis Perry has done with Flint Powers over the last couple of years. And the job he's done with the program in winning their first state championship in history last winter, which is actually kind of hard to believe. I had to double and triple check the MHSAA website to confirm that Powers hadn't won a state title until last year, and I'm still not 100% convinced because it just doesn't seem right. So anyway, seeing guys who have been in the game for a long time, dedicated to high school hockey and been in the game for as long as Travis has, to finally get over the hump and win that first one is really something special. And I think a lot of people in the high school hockey circles can be happy for a guy like that. I think of guys like Dave Mitchell, Rick Gadwa, some of those guys who had been in the hunt for 5, 6, 8, 10 years before they finally, claimed a state championship. So certainly happy for him, happy for the program to kind of have that illustrious, what do they call it? Elusive feather in the cap. That senior class too, and the run they made last March was years in the making. And I feel like it's a very common story in high school hockey where you get a group of kids 5, 6, 8, 10 guys who grew up playing together, right? They played youth hockey together at 6, 8, 10 years old. And then they come up through the high school hockey circles, and one or two make it as a freshman, four or five make it as a sophomore, 8 or 10 make it as juniors, and then by the time senior year comes, it all kind of culminates with a big championship run like that. So it was a pretty tight knit group, obviously, where the core players had been together for a long time. But none of those guys are walking through the door here in November. The Chargers roster, I think, is going to get quite an overhaul here after graduating 12 seniors. They spent the last few years putting that program, or what did I? Sorry, I really got off rhythm there. The last few years they've put a pretty good thumping on some SVL teams, and Powers could bring. Um, there's a possibility, I'll say, for Powers to bring in a completely new crop of talent and continue not skip a beat and keep buzzing through the SVL. But there's a lot to replace. There's a lot of other teams in the league that are returning some pretty nice pieces. Excuse me. Um, so I think a lot of opponents in the SVL, after spending the last couple of years licking their wounds, teams like Saginaw Heritage, Bay City, the Midland schools, might be able to exact some revenge on the Chargers after the last couple seasons, like I mentioned. So, before Powers made its run and really asserted itself on the state level, Saginaw Heritage was that team to beat in the SVL, and JJ Bamberger had that program in the top 10, top 15 regularly, and had made several trips to Plymouth. So they'd played second fiddle a little bit to the Chargers in the last couple seasons. I think that gap could finally, be closed a good amount here moving forward. Uh, you got guys like Owen Turner, Logan Betcher coming back. That's pretty big for Heritage. So I like the Hawks a lot this year, especially right out of the gate. Bay City returns its entire top line. A guy, Gunnar Weber, who's a guy I liked a ton at MDHL this fall. He's very unassuming when you see him on the ice. He never struck me as very dynamic in the MDHL or at that level of play, but sure has a knack for just being in the right place at the right time. And even at the showcase where you're talking, the best players in that league. I believe Weber had 2 goals, maybe even added an assist to that. So, you're on the ice with the best in the league. And then, oh, by the way, you're also sneaking in and scoring some cleaning up the garbage in front, and scoring some scrappy goals. So, not to mention too, his teammates Sean Daly and Lucas Neiman on either side of him as well. That makes for a really good top line. Goaltending was young last year. They had a freshman and a sophomore. Assuming you get both of those guys back, that's always an ace up the sleeve as well, which I've talked about a bunch. Anytime you can get starting goaltending back for another season is big. I circled November 29th as a day to watch because Powers goes to Bay City. And in my mind, that game could potentially have upset written all over it. I still think the Chargers will be in the hunt. I don't mean to dismiss them by any stretch of the imagination, but buckle up, because I just think the league has been starved a little bit for the last 3 or 4 years, and everybody else is ready to eat. So it's like it's going to be, how do the Chargers respond as that bullseye has gotten bigger and bigger on their backs. Every game in league play could be a grind this year for them, because everybody's going to get up for them, and everybody's going to have some weapons that are dangerous and could potentially threaten the Chargers. As I mentioned, even Bay City with a top line. Midland has experience. Midland Dow has experience. Heritage, as I mentioned too. They're actually my pick to win the league this year. JJ, like I mentioned, has had a few, we can say, down years, and I throw air quotes on that because even their down years are pretty good years compared to a lot of programs around the state. Obviously, I think they started to trend back up last season. He's got some nice players coming back. I think that trend continues, and I think they catch up and close that gap with Powers and potentially retake that top spot after a 3-year hiatus atop the SVL. So Um, I could potentially too, if you do all those things, I think it sets you up in a position where you can start looking at being in the hunt at the state level as well. JJ and the Hawks are no strangers to Plymouth. Then they've been to Final Fours and they've been to state championships. You take care of business in a really tough Saginaw Valley league, and you could potentially be in that mix yet again at the state level. So I just think it's got the potential to be a really big year for Heritage, and excited to see kind of how it all unfolds. Um, a couple other players I want to mention here. Let me make sure. All right, I think we can get through all this. What do we got here? Just under we'll call it the 3-minute warning. I gotta get these guys in here. I mentioned Bay City bringing two goalies back, both underclassmen. Nash Leonard was a sophomore last year. Owen Grendel was a freshman. They split duties. It was kind of a timeshare in net. I'd expect that to kind of be the case this year as well. I thought both guys looking at their bios and everything, both saw pretty meaningful matchups. I didn't really look at it like one goalie got the more difficult matchups than the other. Looking at um, Leonard being the older guy, maybe you tend to lean that way a little bit because he's got just that extra year of experience. But Grendel, even as a freshman, he drew matchups with Forest Hill Central, with Portage, with Clarkston, right? Like you guys have heard me rave about Clarkston, and Bay City trotted out a freshman there when they took him on last year. So I think a coach like Zach Schock probably has a lot of confidence in both of those guys, and obviously you have two goalies to lean on. That's never a problem, never a bad problem as a coach. It's a good resource to have. So definitely like that a lot. Let's see here. Speaking of young guys too, Zane Rastelow will be just a sophomore for Midland Dow. Dow again was another team who kind of had a bit of a tough go at it last year, but I chalk it up to kind of growing pains. They had young guys like Rastelow, a couple other guys I'm blanking on, and I have like 400 tabs over here. If I could comb through them real quick, I could tell you who some of those other young guys were offhand. But Rastelow reminds me a lot of, and maybe this reference is going to show my age, and some of the kids won't get it, but reminds me a lot of like Thomas Holmstrom type around the net. He's not the prettiest like skater, maybe not even pretty with the puck, but gets a lot of good shit done around the net in tight quarters, makes things kind of ugly, scores a lot of those garbage goals in front. That's at least what I saw from the MHA showcase. That's a guy who can potentially have really good value in a lineup because you love to have skill guys and perimeter guys who can wheel and deal and do those things, but you ultimately need a bit of a space eater too, someone who can go to the net hard, take defensemen out of the play, muck it up, make things difficult on a goalie, and I think Rastelow has the potential to be that type of guy. Oh shoot, okay. Had some more power stuff I wanted to get to. We'll have to table that for another day. But nonetheless, like I said, I think that league is going to be pretty tightly contested. I think you could see the league champ having at least one loss, whoever it may be. I just think it's going to be a neck and neck race there for everybody involved. So, okay, we are wrapping things up here. Got one more period left to go. Let me refresh real quick and need a shift change. I need someone off the bench come in and finish this out for me. Okay. So restart the clock. We'll get into the Metro League in 3, 2, 1. All right. So I was told that the Metro League is the oldest league in Michigan high school hockey, but I also feel like I need someone to confirm or deny that because I'm not 100% sure. I asked the question, "Hey, is this the oldest league?" And the reply was, "Yeah, I think it's the oldest league." Like there was really no context or substance to it, so I'm a little leery of that. But feel free to fact check or call me out there. So let's see here. Last season's champs. Again, this is another conference split into two divisions, and then they crown a division champ for the East and for the West. Riverview Gabriel Richard was the champ out of the East. Ann Arbor, Gabriel Richard was a champion out of the West. Um, and let's see here. What am I missing? Oh, okay. All right. Whoops, my bad. Um, three programs. This was actually kind of wild to me. Three programs out of this conference alone won regional titles in the 2023 state tournament. Eight of those 12 member teams finished with an overall record north of 500. And as many as seven different programs have won the Metro League championships in the past decade. So, uh, a lot of parity in the conference itself, but then also the conference competes well at the state level, obviously with the number of regional titles that we've seen, even as recently as last winter. So, as far as the Gabriel Richards go, I'll start with Riverview Gabriel Richard. And in a way, I think similar to the Flint Powers senior class that I was just talking about, Pioneers graduated their top six scorers from a season ago. Those six players accounted for, listen to this, 88.9% of the team's offense, which is an incredible loss there, right? Like, even if you are a reload, not rebuild type of program, that's a lot to try to reload. I gotta expect a pretty significant step back this season for Pioneers. Even with a guy like Ryan Rainey coming back in net, I'm definitely not writing them off. I just think, when you're losing that much offense and trying to, rebuild, reload on the fly, you're not going to do that without some pretty significant growing pains along the way. Um, with RGR potentially trending down a bit in one division, I see Ann Arbor Gabriel Richard kind of on an upward trajectory, and that's been a pretty constant upward trajectory that's been building exponentially over the last couple of years. Coach Clint Robert, he's a guy who I got a ton of respect for. He does a fantastic job with that program. Um, been really impressive with the Irish. He's found a way to reload and reload and reload with talent over the last few seasons. Quentin Gove was a top D man in the state, prominently featured in my second edition of the top 100 players to know in high school hockey. The last time we started doing some YouTube podcasts, he graduated in 2021. Robert replaced Gove with Jack Waldo. Waldo was a top prospect in the state, only to graduate the following year. Waldo left, and Jack Lipinski came into the picture last season. Now, in all likelihood, Lipinski graduates and passes that theoretical torch to Nick Dunphy. There's obviously there's other pieces to the puzzle there for AAGR, but this program has enjoyed a ton of success in the face of quite a bit of turnover at the top of their roster. They've managed to secure city championships and be in the top team in Ann Arbor. They've clinched league championships and being Metro League champs each of the last three seasons. And now clinching a regional championships. Like I said, one of those three teams last year to do it. I think the Irish are close, if not already there, where they should start competing for state championships. And that's saying a lot. And that's what I mean by that exponential trajectory, right? When you start at some of these programs, and I say that because, during our time at Saline, that was our goal. Hey, we want to, let's start small. We want to defend the cube. And then once you defend the cube, you want to the cube, Ann Arbor Ice Cube. You want to win all your home games. You want to win all your rivalry games. Then from there, we want to win conference championships. Then from there, we set our sights on regional championship. Like, it's just kind of you set your goal small, you hit that goal, you expand, you expand, you expand. I think Ann Arbor Gabriel Richard is in a position now where they've hit all those check marks, and it's time to shift focus now to state championships potentially, which is an exciting time, I think, for them. A couple other programs I like too. Country Day is back. I'll do my best college football. Texas is back, baby. Like, Country Day is back, in my opinion. Frank Novak had a record-breaking 2 or 3 year run there, producing high-end prospects, winning state championships, and setting state records from a individual player and from a team perspective. And goals allowed. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but I think they were in a position where they gave up less than 1 goal a game for an entire season. So uh, I think the Yellow Jackets are back in the Metro League scene in a big way, and maybe even at the state level as well. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure they're quite as deep to start contending again at the state level, but I wouldn't rule it out. Clay Spencer is the real deal in my opinion. May be the best forward in the league. There's a fistful of other important returners there as well. Hunter Novak, Trevor Corliss, just to name a few. Even Gross Eel, they graduated just 6 players from a season ago and have a good amount coming back. So it's a difficult program to play against. They're always in the hunt. It seems like in the Metro League. I think they finished second in the division last year. So you're bringing back a guy like Fisher Gurney, who was a high flying defenseman for them. Kid had 55 points from the blue line and led the Red Devils in scoring as a junior. So you get that back. That's a huge leg up. Um, Leg up, not to be confused with Liggett, can I think University Liggett can be a bit of a wild card as well. Didn't look to have a ton coming back, but with some of those programs, you don't know what fresh faces are coming in. So Liggett has been a pretty solid program consistently over the years. So you got to imagine they'd be in the mix. Allen Park returns a good amount, as I recall, too. Going through my notes, Logan Gent up front for starters. He was a guy who jumped out to me as a pretty key contributor coming back. So again, you have all those components coming back in the mix with, I mentioned Liggett, Country Day, Allen Park, all of those. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you got 3 of those teams in the same division as Riverview, Gabriel Richard. RGR kind of on that trend downward. Some of these other teams starting to build up and have some key pieces coming back. Allen Park to me is always a hard one to play against. Every time I feel like I count them out, they go out and beat Trenton in a really bizarre, fluky game. Like it's just a program. The Jags, you can never count them out now. So especially with RGR being maybe a little susceptible this year. Could be an interesting one. Uh, Again, with those teams being on the rise and RGR kind of falling off, it really only heightens my concerns for the Pioneers there. Let's see here. What else we got with on short time? I did want to mention, well, I'll do the other division as well. I think it was pretty obvious though. Uh, Ann Arbor, Gabriel Richard, I think they do make it a four-peat there in the Metro League and claim yet another West Division championship. Out of the East, though, as I mentioned, a couple teams on the hunt there, plus RGR. I'm not going to rule them out, but ultimately, I like Country Day. I think they're back in a big way. I mentioned that. I think it starts with a Metro League championship, and then we see what unfolds in the playoffs. But ultimately, leave it there. One thing I did want to mention, watching Ryan Rainey, who's obviously maybe the biggest returner of all players in this league, right? You're getting a goalie back to the Pioneers, a Pioneer group that had won a bunch of games in the last couple of years, and Rainey was in net for that. Watching him in the MDHL this fall, I guess I'll call them concerns. Like I just didn't feel like maybe it was his best showing per se in the MDHL, but he was still a tournament team guy for them. Had every opportunity there to kind of prove himself and show out as one of the top goalies in the state. May not have been his best stretch, but like I said, you get back to winter action, you get back with the RGR program, some of that stuff. I'll wrap this up here as the beeper goes off. I think he'll start to find more of that rhythm that Ryan Rainey that we've come to know over the last couple of seasons. I think he gets back into that groove now that he's kind of gets back into that RGR, that Pioneer routine, the practice and games and familiarity of in-season play. The MDHL is a tricky one. I've said it multiple times. It's very tough on goalies. So I did just kind of want to finish that thought on that. I don't know. And he might even say, it wasn't his best couple of weeks of action there, but ultimately I do think I'm not going to write him off by any stretch of the imagination. I think he gets back in that winter rhythm and in a groove, and I think things turn around a good amount there for him and the Pioneers. So like I said, I'm not ruling him out, not ruling him out either. So okay, so with that, we've now gone through 9 conferences. I got 4 more on tap. Let me tease a couple for next week. We just buttoned up the Metro League. Next week, I'll hit on the OK Conference out west and the Great Lakes. And we will probably only do those 2 because the OK Conference is so big with 3 tiers basically. Maybe we'll even break down each tier separately, but obviously a lot to talk about there. Getting down to it, only a couple weeks now to the season. Um, if I didn't give you enough information here on the podcast, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify, or you're watching here on YouTube, you can always get even more information, more stats, more write-ups, more players to pay attention to on pdspicks.com. I encourage you to go there and check out all the content there as well. And again, if you've made it this far into the episode, be sure to like and subscribe. You want to get at me, you want to talk about any of this on social media, obviously I'm available there as well. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Might start doing more on Threads if you guys are familiar with that. I saw a not so encouraging tweet about it may go to a pay model, and so if they start charging users for Twitter, my strategy may shift a little bit there, and maybe we'll transition to Threads full time. So keep an eye out for that. I did get a comment here. Let me see. Last weekend, MHA 16s lost in a 20-round shootout to the Rochester Coalition. Could be the longest shootout I've ever seen. That's from Kyle Marchand. Wow, 20-round shootout. That's so long that you're really delaying the Zamboni, the resurfacing, and everything. You're really pushing games back after that. Rochester Coalition, I'd have to look them up at the 16U level. Let's see if I can do this real quick. I don't want to drag this on too long, but if my hockey rankings loads quick enough, I'd be curious to see where Rocco ranks. Rochester Coalition, 79th in the country. They're 10, 14, and 2 overall. Let me see some of the teams they've played so far. Rocco, I'm familiar with them. I want to say they won a national championship at the 18U level a year or 2 years ago. Wow, they've played a lot of games already. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, 4-3 over MHA. Wow, that's wild to me. 20-round shootout. Well, that's a fun one. Wow, Rocco played Bishop Kearney and only lost 2-1. Well, there's some good showings here. So I think that's a pretty solid win there for MHA. Let me pull up game sheets, see if it shows anything. This is my problem though with see, this one actually does have names. I know you guys can't see this. I'm kind of talking about it, but a lot of the Maha games have game sheets, stats, but none of the goals scored, none of the information, like it doesn't tell you what player scored or who factored in on the goals. It just gives you a timestamp and basically says Little Caesar scored at the 53-second mark of the period. But the game sheet here I'm looking at for MHA and Rochester Coalition has shots, has who was in net, has who assisted. Like this is good information. So, holy crap! I'm looking at the shootout summary. Guys had to have shot more than once. Did the whole team shoot? I don't see any duplicates. That's incredible. Oh, Ian Evans shot twice. Drew Lesperance shot twice. Julian Johnson shot twice. Okay. So some guys did go twice. I was going to say that would have been wild if you had to go through the entire roster, which I guess they probably still could have went through the entire roster. But nonetheless, all right. Ooh, total tangent there. Thanks a lot, Kyle. I appreciate that. But Super interesting stuff. Okay. So next week, OK Conference, Great Lakes. We'll continue our previews of the conferences in Michigan high school hockey. We'll also maybe take a peek back at what happened this weekend in the CCM Motown. So we'll have any recaps or thoughts and analysis from that tournament as well, and then keep an eye out for any other Michigan AAA action going on throughout the state. So again, like, subscribe, follow me on all the social media platforms. Always open to talk hockey. Went back and forth with a guy on Facebook last night. Getting excited for the season. So DMs are open. Hit me up whenever about whatever, and any of these topics we discussed today as well. Until next time, skate hard, have fun. I'll see you guys.